The scent of cheap perfume clung to Mr. Richard's dress shirt as I scrubbed at the collar in the laundry room, my weathered hands working the stain remover into the fabric with practiced precision. Above me, I could hear Mrs. Clara's gentle voice drifting down from the children's bedroom, reading them a bedtime story about knights and dragons. The irony wasn't lost on me. 20 years. I had spent exactly 20 years of my life polishing the marble floors of this mansion, sweeping secrets under Persian rugs, and loving this family as if they were my own blood. When Richard looked at me, if he bothered to look at all, he saw nothing more than a pair of hands that dusted his shelves, a shadow that prepared his meals and vanished before he could remember I had a face. But what he didn't know, what he had never bothered to consider in all these years, was that shadows see everything. Shadows watch. Shadows remember. And on that particular evening when I discovered him with that blonde woman in the guest house, I had chosen silence. I had swallowed my shock, my disgust, my moral outrage, and I had said nothing. But today? Today everything changed. My name is Elena Martinez. When I first walked through the service entrance of this estate, my hair was jet black without a single strand of gray, my back was straight, and my dreams were still intact. I had come to America from Mexico with nothing but a work visa and a heart full of hope. The Whitmore family had just gotten married. Richard Whitmore III and Clara Ashford Whitmore were the picture of upper-class bliss, fresh from their honeymoon in the Hamptons, ready to start their life together in this sprawling estate in Connecticut. Clara was the kindest woman I had ever met. She never called me the help or the maid. She called me the heart of this home. She asked about my daughter back in Guadalajara, remembered my birthday, and insisted I join them for Thanksgiving dinner every year, despite Richard's barely concealed displeasure. But Richard Whitmore III was living proof of how power and money could rot a person from the inside out. His family's wealth went back 4 generations. Old money, as they say. Oil money, railroad money, the kind of fortune built on the backs of people like me, though he would never acknowledge that fact. Over the years, I watched Richard transform from a merely arrogant young man into something far worse. The way he spoke to Clara changed. The warmth drained from his voice when he addressed her. He started staying late at the office, taking more business trips, and when he was home, he lived in his study with a glass of scotch that never seemed to empty. The first incident happened 3 months ago. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesdays were when I deep cleaned the library, dusting Richard's collection of first edition books that he had never read but displayed like trophies. He was supposed to be on a business trip to Chicago. Clara had mentioned it that morning over breakfast, sighing with that particular sadness of a woman who had grown accustomed to her husband's absence. I was on the rolling ladder, reaching for the top shelf, when I heard it. Laughter. Feminine laughter that definitely didn't belong to Clara. Then his voice, low and intimate in a way I hadn't heard him speak to his wife in years. My blood ran cold. The feather duster in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I climbed down from the ladder slowly, my heart hammering against my ribcage. The sounds were coming from the sunroom, just off the library. The French doors were partially open. I should have walked away. I should have turned around, gone back to the kitchen, and pretended I had heard nothing. But I didn't. Something compelled me forward, some instinct that told me this was important, that this moment would matter. Through the gap in the doors, I saw them. Richard, still in his tailored suit, his jacket discarded on Clara's antique chaise lounge. And Sheila Hammond. Clara's best friend since college. The woman who had been maid of honor at their wedding. The woman who came over for wine nights and book club, who Clara trusted with everything. They were wrapped around each other like teenagers, all hands and hungry kisses. I must have made a sound because Richard's eyes suddenly snapped toward the door. Our gazes met for a fraction of a second. But here's the thing that has haunted me ever since: he looked right through me. I was so insignificant, so invisible to him, that even catching him in the act of betraying his wife didn't register as a threat. He simply turned back to Sheila, and I backed away, my whole body shaking. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my small room on the 3rd floor, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. Should I tell Clara? Must I tell Clara? But Clara was sick. She had been diagnosed with a heart condition 6 months earlier. The doctors said stress could be dangerous for her. If she finds out, I told myself, it could kill her. I convinced myself that Richard would come to his senses, that this was a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness he would regret. I told myself that keeping quiet was an act of protection, of loyalty to Clara. What a fool I was. I mistook my silence for discretion, my inaction for compassion. But all I was really doing was giving a monster room to grow. Richard never knew that I knew. He continued treating me exactly as he always had, which is to say, he barely acknowledged my existence. When I brought him his coffee in the morning, black with 1 sugar, he didn't look up from his Wall Street Journal. When I served dinner, he didn't say please or thank you. In his world, I was part of the furniture. A coffee-making, floor-scrubbing, dinner-cooking appliance that occasionally required a paycheck. But yesterday, everything came to a head. Yesterday was the day the dam finally broke. Clara had gone to Manhattan for her treatment. She went every other week to see a specialist at Mount Sinai. The appointments usually took all day. The house was empty, or at least, Richard thought it was. I had told him I was taking the day off to visit my daughter in Queens. But my daughter had canceled at the last minute. Her youngest was sick with the flu, and she didn't want me exposed. So I stayed home, deciding to use the quiet day to organize the storage room in the attic, a project I had been putting off for months. I was up there, sorting through old winter clothes and holiday decorations, when I heard it. The distinctive rumble of Richard's Mercedes pulling into the circular driveway. My stomach dropped. He wasn't supposed to be home. He had a meeting in Boston, he'd be gone until tomorrow. That's what he had told Clara. I moved to the small attic window and looked down at the driveway. Richard was climbing out of his car, but he wasn't alone. The passenger door opened, and out stepped a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25 years old, wearing a tight pencil skirt and heels that she clearly wasn't used to walking in. I recognized her. Monica. The new intern at his law firm. Clara had mentioned her once, laughing about how Richard complained about having to mentor children fresh out of law school. This girl was young enough to be his daughter. Hell, she was younger than Richard and Clara's oldest son, Christopher, who was 27. I watched them from the attic window as they walked across the lawn toward the pool house. Richard had his hand on the small of her back. She was laughing at something he said, tossing her hair like she was in a romantic comedy. And then I saw what he was carrying. A bottle of wine. Not just any wine. The 1982 Chateau Margaux that Clara's father had given them for their 25th wedding anniversary last year. Clara had been saving it for a special occasion. Richard was opening it for his mistress, who probably couldn't tell the difference between a $50 bottle and a $5,000 bottle. Something inside me snapped. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a pattern. This was a lifestyle. Richard was using Clara's money, Clara's home, Clara's life, and he was defiling it all with woman after woman, and he felt so entitled, so untouchable, that he didn't even bother being discreet anymore. I came down from the attic. My hands weren't shaking. My breath was steady. For the first time in 3 months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I walked through the main house to Richard's study. It was his sanctuary, his private domain. I wasn't supposed to enter when he wasn't home. But I had been cleaning this house for 20 years. I knew where everything was. I knew that he kept his passwords written on a piece of paper tucked inside a hollowed-out book on his shelf. I knew where he stashed his private files. And most importantly, I knew that his supposedly secret safe behind the Remington painting had a combination lock set to Clara's birthday. The irony of that detail had always struck me as particularly cruel. I opened the safe. Inside was exactly what I expected: stacks of cash, some important documents, Clara's grandmother's jewelry that she thought had been stolen years ago. But there was something else. A folder. A thick manila folder with asset transfer documentation printed on the tab. I pulled it out and sat down in Richard's leather chair. My heart was pounding now, but not from fear. From rage. As I read through the pages, everything became clear. Richard wasn't just cheating on Clara. He was planning to rob her blind. The documents detailed a plan that was already in motion. Using Clara's heart condition as justification, Richard had been working with a corrupt psychiatrist to build a case that Clara was mentally incompetent. There were falsified medical reports claiming she had episodes of confusion, memory loss, and poor judgment. There were statements from witnesses describing incidents that had never happened. And there, at the bottom of the pile, was the real prize: power of attorney documents and a revised trust that would transfer complete control of Clara's family fortune, all $70 million of it, to Richard. Clara's family money. Not Richard's. Clara's father had been a self-made man, built a technology company from nothing in the 80s, sold it for a fortune. That money was Clara's. And Richard was stealing it while slowly poisoning her reputation, probably planning to have her committed to some facility where she'd be locked away while he spent her money on girls young enough to be his children. I sat there for a long moment, those papers spread across Richard's desk. Then I pulled out my phone. I didn't take pictures of Richard and that girl by the pool. That would have been too simple, too tabloid. Instead, I photographed every single page in that folder. Every fake medical report. Every bribed statement. Every piece of Richard's scheme. Then I went to the window. I could see them now, Richard and Monica, in the pool. She was in a bikini that definitely hadn't been in her bag when she arrived. He must keep clothing here for his rotating cast of women. He was pouring the wine, that irreplaceable bottle of Margaux, into plastic poolside cups. 50 years of aging, thousands of dollars, poured into red Solo cups like cheap beer at a college party. I returned to the living room. I took Clara's favorite vase, the Waterford crystal her mother had given her, and placed it prominently on the entrance hall table where it couldn't be missed. Then I pulled out my phone and called Clara. Elena? Her voice was tired. The treatments exhausted her. Is everything all right? You're supposed to be with your daughter today. Mrs. Clara, I said, and my voice was steady, cold even. 20 years of swallowed anger made it easy. I need you to check your phone. I'm sending you some photographs. I need you to look at them right now. Elena, what's wrong? You're scaring me. Please, I said. Just look. I sent the files. All of them. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out for what felt like an eternity. I could hear her breathing, hear the small sounds as she scrolled through image after image. Then I heard her take a deep, shuddering breath. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. The sick, tired woman was gone. In her place was the Clara I remembered from 20 years ago, the strong woman who had built a life on her own terms before Richard had slowly eroded her spirit. "Elena," she said, and her voice was steel. "Do not call the police yet. Call my attorney. Martin Rothschild. His number is in my phone book in the kitchen drawer. Tell him everything. Tell him I want Richard out of that house tonight, and I want every asset frozen by morning. And Elena? Lock all the doors. Nobody leaves that house until this is handled properly." I smiled. Not a pleasant smile. A smile that had 20 years of observation behind it. "Yes, Mrs. Clara," I said. "It will be my pleasure." Martin Rothschild answered on the second ring. I had known him for years, had served him coffee and pastries during his meetings with Clara about estate planning and charitable foundations. He was old school, probably in his 70s, with silver hair and an impeccable reputation. When I explained the situation, speaking quickly and quietly from the kitchen phone, there was a long pause. "Elena," he said finally, his voice grave. "Are you absolutely certain about what you're telling me? These are serious allegations." "Mr. Rothschild," I replied, "I have photographs of documents from Richard's personal safe. Medical reports, witness statements, asset transfer papers. All of it. And Mrs. Clara has already seen them." Another pause. Then I heard the sound of papers rustling, a chair creaking. He was already moving. "I'm leaving my office now. I'll be there in 45 minutes. In the meantime, I'm making some calls. Elena, this is very important. Do not confront Mr. Whitmore. Do not let him know that anything is wrong. Can you do that?" I looked out the window toward the pool house. Through the glass walls, I could see Richard and Monica, still laughing, still drinking Clara's wine. "Yes, sir," I said. "I can do that." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. I had just hung up the phone when I heard the sliding glass door from the pool area open. Footsteps in the hallway. Richard's voice, slightly slurred, calling out, "Elena? Elena, I know you're here. I saw your car in the garage." My car. I had forgotten about my car. Stupid. 20 years of invisible service had made me forget that I left traces, that I existed in physical space. I took a deep breath, smoothed my uniform, and walked out of the kitchen into the main hallway. Richard stood there in swimming trunks and a monogrammed robe that Clara had given him last Christmas. His hair was wet, slicked back. Behind him, trying to look inconspicuous and failing miserably, was Monica, wrapped in a towel that barely covered anything, clutching her clothes to her chest. "Elena," Richard said, and his tone was sharp, accusatory. "What are you doing here? I specifically remember you saying you were taking the day off." I kept my face neutral, my voice steady. It was a skill I had perfected over 2 decades. "My plans changed, Mr. Richard. My daughter's child is ill. I thought I would use the time to catch up on some organizational projects. I didn't realize you would be home." His eyes narrowed. He was trying to calculate something, trying to figure out if I had seen anything, if I knew anything. "Well, you need to leave. Now. Take the rest of the day. Take tomorrow too. I'll pay you for the time." It was the first time in probably 5 years that Richard had voluntarily offered me anything. That alone should have told him I knew. But arrogance makes people stupid. Of course, Mr. Richard, I said, lowering my eyes in that subservient way he expected. I'll just gather my things and go. Would you like me to prepare anything before I leave? Some coffee perhaps? No, he snapped. Then, softening slightly, probably aware that he was being too harsh, no, thank you. Just lock up on your way out. Monica giggled nervously. Richard shot her a look that could freeze water. I nodded, turned, and walked back toward the kitchen. But I didn't leave. Instead, I went to the small bathroom off the laundry room, the one the staff used, and I locked the door. I sat on the closed toilet lid and waited, checking my phone every few minutes. 20 minutes later, a text from Mr. Rothschild, 5 minutes away. Police are en route. Judge has granted emergency restraining order and asset freeze. Stay out of sight. My heart was racing now. This was really happening. After 20 years of watching, of keeping silent, of playing invisible, I was finally going to see Richard Whitmore face consequences. I heard voices in the main hall. Richard's voice, louder now, annoyed. What do you mean you can't find your keys? Check your bag again. Monica's voice, shrill with panic, they're not here. I had them when we came in, I swear. I had her keys. They had been sitting on the kitchen counter, and I had pocketed them when I walked through earlier. A small precaution, but an effective one. Then, the doorbell. Not the polite, single ring of a visitor. A firm, authoritative series of rings. Official rings. Who the hell is that? Richard's voice carried clearly through the house. Footsteps. The sound of the front door opening. Then Richard's voice, shocked, Martin? What are you doing here? Mr. Whitmore. Martin Rothschild's voice was formal, cold. I'm here on behalf of my client, Mrs. Clara Whitmore. I have some documents that require your immediate attention. Clara sent you? Is she all right? What's going on? Richard's confusion was almost convincing. Almost. Mrs. Whitmore is quite well, thank you. However, she has become aware of certain activities that require immediate legal intervention. These gentlemen behind me are Officers Patterson and Rodriguez from the Connecticut State Police. They're here to ensure that this process goes smoothly. Police? Martin, what the hell is this? Some kind of joke? I crept out of the bathroom and positioned myself where I could see the front hall without being seen. Martin stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand, looking every inch the powerful attorney he was. Behind him were indeed 2 state police officers, hands resting casually near their belts in that way that said they were ready for trouble if it came. This is no joke, Richard. I have here an emergency restraining order, signed by Judge Morrison 30 minutes ago. You are hereby ordered to vacate this property immediately. You are not to contact Mrs. Whitmore, you are not to approach within 500 feet of her, and you are not to access any bank accounts, credit cards, or assets held jointly or in her name. Richard's face went from confused to pale to red in the span of seconds. This is insane. You can't throw me out of my own house. Actually, Martin said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, this house is owned by the Ashford Family Trust, of which Mrs. Whitmore is the sole trustee. You have no ownership stake in this property. Furthermore, I have evidence that you have been engaging in fraud, attempting to illegally obtain power of attorney through falsified medical documents, and, he glanced past Richard to where Monica stood frozen in the hallway, still in her towel, conducting affairs on the premises, which violates the morality clause in your prenuptial agreement. Prenuptial agreement? Monica squeaked. You said you were divorced. Oh, this was getting better by the second. Richard whirled on her. Shut up. Just shut your mouth. Then back to Martin. I don't know what lies Clara has been feeding you, but... The evidence doesn't come from Mrs. Whitmore, Martin interrupted smoothly. It comes from your own safe. Documents in your handwriting, emails from your personal account. It's all quite thorough, Richard. Frankly, I'm impressed by how meticulously you documented your own crimes. That's when Richard seemed to remember I existed. His head snapped around, scanning the hallway, and his eyes locked onto me standing in the shadows near the kitchen entrance. Understanding dawned on his face like a toxic sunrise. You, he breathed. You did this. You went through my things. You had no right. I stepped forward into the light. For 20 years, I had made myself small, quiet, invisible. Not anymore. I had every right, I said, my voice calm and clear. This is Mrs. Clara's house. Everything in it belongs to her. I am her employee, following her interests. You, Mr. Richard, are just a guest who has overstayed his welcome. He lunged toward me. Actually lunged, like he might hit me. The police officers moved instantly, intercepting him, each grabbing an arm. Sir, you need to calm down, Officer Patterson said firmly. You're making this worse for yourself. She's a thief. She stole from my safe. Arrest her. Richard was shouting now, spittle flying from his mouth, his face purple with rage. Martin Rothschild sighed. Richard, the safe is Clara's property, in Clara's house, containing documents about Clara's assets. Elena committed no crime. However, your little friend there, he nodded toward Monica, is trespassing. Officers, could you please escort her off the property? Monica didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her clothes and practically ran out the front door, her towel slipping as she went. We heard her car, Richard's car actually, since her keys were still in my pocket, roar to life and speed down the driveway. Richard was still struggling against the officers. Let me go. This is my home. You can't do this. Mr. Whitmore, Officer Rodriguez said, his voice patient but firm, you can walk out of here calmly and with dignity, or we can arrest you for trespassing and resisting. Your choice. But either way, you're leaving. Something in Richard broke then. His shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him. He looked around at the grand entrance hall, at the marble floors, at the crystal chandelier Clara's grandmother had brought over from Vienna. This house that had never really been his. I need to get my things, he said quietly. I'm afraid not, Martin said. You may take the clothes you're currently wearing. Everything else remains here pending the division of assets in the divorce proceedings. Divorce? Richard's head snapped up. Clara wants a divorce? Can you imagine why? Martin's voice was dry as dust. The officers escorted Richard toward the door. He was still in his swimming trunks and robe, barefoot, looking utterly defeated. As he passed me, he stopped. The officers held him, but let him speak. You're just a housekeeper, he said, his voice low and venomous. A servant. You think this changes anything? You think you matter? I'll destroy you for this. I'll make sure you never work again. I looked him directly in the eyes. For 20 years, I had lowered my gaze, had made myself invisible. No more. Mr. Richard, I said softly, I'm not just a housekeeper. I'm the person who saw everything. I'm the person who remembered everything. I'm the person who loved this family when you couldn't be bothered. And right now, I'm the person who just saved Mrs. Clara's life and her fortune. You can't destroy me because in your world, I was already invisible. But you? Everyone is going to see exactly what you are now. He tried to lunge at me again, but the officers had anticipated it. They pulled him back, practically dragging him toward the door. You'll regret this, he shouted as they pulled him outside. All of you will regret this. The door closed behind them. The house fell silent. Martin Rothschild turned to me, a small smile on his weathered face. Elena, he said, that was remarkably well done. Clara chose her loyalty well. I felt my knees go weak. Now that it was over, now that Richard was gone, the adrenaline was leaving my body. I sat down heavily on the bottom step of the grand staircase. Is Mrs. Clara really going to be okay? I asked. She's stronger than you might think, Martin said, sitting down beside me, his expensive suit be damned. And now that we have evidence of Richard's fraud, we can not only stop it but potentially press criminal charges. The falsified medical documents alone could put him away for several years. Good, I said simply. Martin opened his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. Clara asked me to give you this. She wanted you to have it immediately. I opened the envelope. Inside was a check. I stared at the numbers, counted the zeros twice to make sure I wasn't imagining it. $250,000. I can't accept this, I whispered. You can and you will, Martin said firmly. Clara insists. She says it's 20 years of back pay for services rendered above and beyond your duties. And she wants you to know that your job is secure for as long as you want it. With a substantial raise, I might add. I looked down at the check in my trembling hands. This was more money than I had ever imagined having. I could retire. I could bring my daughter here from Queens, help her buy a house. I could finally, after 20 years, breathe. But I shook my head. Mr. Rothschild, I appreciate this more than I can say. But my job isn't finished yet. He raised an eyebrow. Oh. I stood up, smoothed my uniform, and looked him directly in the eye. There's something else you need to know. When I was photographing the documents in Richard's safe, I found more than just the papers about Mrs. Clara. Martin stood as well, suddenly alert. What do you mean? There was another folder. A thicker one, actually. It had to do with the law firm. Whitmore, Sterling, and Associates. Richard's firm. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the photos I had taken. I didn't understand all of it, but there were client names, account numbers, transfer records. And there was another name that appeared on almost every document. I showed him the phone. Martin's face went pale as he looked at the images. Douglas Sterling, he breathed. Richard's senior partner. Is that bad? I asked. Martin looked at me, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked genuinely shaken. Elena, if these documents show what I think they show, Richard wasn't working alone. This isn't just about stealing from Clara. This is about embezzlement from client accounts. This is federal fraud. This could bring down one of the oldest law firms in Connecticut. He scrolled through more of the photos, his expression growing darker with each image. Finally, he looked up at me. Elena, I need you to send me all of these photographs. Right now. And then I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to forget you ever saw these. When the FBI comes, and they will come, you tell them that you found documents related to Clara, you photographed them, and you called me. That's all. You don't mention the other folder. You don't mention Douglas Sterling. Not yet. Why? I was confused. Martin's expression was grim. Because if Douglas Sterling realizes that his crimes are about to be exposed, he'll run. And if he runs, he'll take a lot of evidence with him. We need to move carefully, strategically. And we need to protect you. These men are dangerous, Elena. Richard was just a greedy fool. But Sterling? Sterling is something else entirely. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of dangerous? Martin hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. 3 years ago, a paralegal at the firm noticed some irregularities in the books. She was going to report them. 2 days before she could file her complaint, she died in a car accident. Single vehicle, lost control on a clear day, crashed into a tree. The police ruled it an accident. My mouth went dry. You think? I don't think anything officially, Martin said carefully. But I want you safe. So for now, we focus on Richard. We build that case, we make sure Clara is protected. And in the meantime, I'm going to very quietly reach out to some contacts at the FBI. When we move against Sterling, it needs to be swift and complete. No warning, no time for him to cover his tracks or hurt anyone. I nodded slowly, my mind reeling. I had thought I was protecting Clara from a cheating husband. I hadn't realized I was stepping into something so much bigger, so much darker. There's one more thing, I said quietly. Martin looked at me, waiting. In those documents about the firm, there was another name. It appeared less frequently than Sterling's, but it was there. Someone else who was involved, or at least knew what was happening. Who? I took a breath. Senator Patricia Ashford. Martin's face went completely white. Clara's aunt? The state senator? Yes, sir. He sat back down on the stairs, suddenly looking every one of his 70-some years. Good God, he whispered. This goes all the way to the top. We sat there in silence for a long moment, in that grand entrance hall of the Whitmore mansion. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 6 times. Finally, Martin stood up. Elena, I want you to pack a bag. Tonight, you're going to stay at a hotel. My firm will cover it. Tomorrow, Clara comes home. And after that, we're going to have a very serious conversation about what comes next. I'm not going to hide, I said firmly. I've been invisible for 20 years. I'm done hiding. Martin smiled, a sad smile. You're a brave woman, Elena Martinez. But bravery without strategy is just foolishness. Please. Trust me on this. Let me handle things the right way. I wanted to argue. But I was tired, so very tired. And he was right. I had stumbled into something far beyond my understanding. I needed help. Okay, I said. But Mr. Rothschild? Whatever happens, whatever we have to do, I want to see this through. For Mrs. Clara. She deserves justice. She does, Martin agreed. And she'll get it. I promise you that. He walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. Elena? What you did today, exposing Richard, protecting Clara. That took courage. Real courage. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you're just a housekeeper. You're a hero. Clara knows it. I know it. And soon, the world will know it too. After he left, I stood alone in the empty house. I walked through the rooms slowly, turning on lights as the twilight deepened. The kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals. The living room where I had dusted countless photographs of a family that had slowly fractured. The library where I had first seen Richard's betrayal. This house had been my home for 20 years. But tonight, for the first time, it felt different. It felt like it was finally, truly Clara's again. I packed my bag, locked up the house, and drove to the hotel Martin had arranged. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, I thought about what tomorrow would bring. Clara coming home. The divorce proceedings. The FBI investigation. Senator Ashford. I had thought I was just protecting a kind woman from a cruel husband. But I had pulled on a thread, and now I was watching an entire tapestry unravel. And somewhere out there, Douglas Sterling and Patricia Ashford were going about their lives, not knowing that their secrets had been discovered. Not knowing that a housekeeper they had never bothered to acknowledge was about to bring their world crashing down. I smiled in the darkness. Richard had been right about one thing: I was just a housekeeper. But shadows see everything. And sometimes, the invisible people are the most dangerous of all. Clara came home the next afternoon. I was there waiting, having returned to the mansion at dawn to prepare everything. I had opened all the curtains, letting sunlight flood into rooms that had felt dark for too long. I had arranged fresh flowers from the garden in every room. I had made her favorite lunch, chicken salad with cranberries and walnuts, just the way her mother used to make it. When her car pulled into the driveway, I stood at the front door, my hands clasped in front of me, suddenly nervous. I hadn't seen her since everything had happened. What if she was angry? What if she felt I had overstepped? What if? The car door opened, and Clara stepped out. She looked different. Despite everything she had been through, despite the betrayal and the shock, she stood taller. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was up. This was the Clara I remembered from 20 years ago, the woman who had built her father's company into an empire before retiring to focus on philanthropy. She walked toward me, and I saw tears in her eyes. Before I could say anything, she pulled me into an embrace. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me." I hugged her back, this woman I had served and loved for 2 decades. "You would have done the same for me," I said. She pulled back, smiling through her tears. "Yes, but I wouldn't have been nearly as clever about it. Martin told me everything. How you found the documents, how you handled Richard. Elena, you were magnificent." We went inside, and over lunch, I told her the full story. Every detail. Finding Richard with Sheila months ago. Seeing him with Monica yesterday. The documents in the safe. The call to Martin. Richard's removal from the house. She listened quietly, her face calm, occasionally asking questions but mostly just absorbing it all. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I knew, you know. Not about the fraud, not about the schemes. But I knew about the affairs. I think I've known for years. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. Mrs. Clara. Please, just Clara. After everything, I think we're past formalities." I nodded. "Clara, then. Why didn't you say anything? Why did you stay?" She looked down at her hands, twisted her wedding ring, though I noticed she had already moved it to her right hand. Fear, I suppose. Fear of being alone. Fear of admitting failure. My parents had such a perfect marriage. I thought if I just tried harder, if I was just better, he would change. But you can't love someone into being a good person. I know that now. You're not alone, I said firmly. You have your children. You have friends who really care about you. And you have me, for whatever that's worth. Clara reached across the table and took my hand. It's worth everything, Elena. You're family. You've always been family. We sat like that for a moment, two women who had survived in a world that often tried to make them invisible. Then Clara's phone buzzed. She looked at it and her expression changed. It's Martin. He wants to come by this evening. He says it's urgent and that you should be here too. My stomach tightened. I knew what this was about. Clara, there's something I need to tell you before he gets here. I told her about the other documents. About Douglas Sterling. About Senator Patricia Ashford. Her face went from shocked to pale to something harder, more determined. My Aunt Patricia, she said quietly. Are you certain? Her name was on multiple documents. I don't know exactly what her role was, but she was involved somehow. Clara stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens. Patricia was always ambitious. She married into the Ashford family, you know. She wasn't born to it. She clawed her way up from nothing, and once she got a taste of power and money, she wanted more. Always more. She turned back to me. My father never trusted her. He left everything to me, not her. She was furious about that. Do you think she would hurt you? To get what she thinks she deserves? Clara considered this. The Patricia I knew? No. But people change. Money and power change people. She paused. We need to be very careful about this, Elena. If Patricia is involved in something criminal, she won't go down quietly. She has connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. That evening, Martin Rothschild arrived with another man I didn't recognize. He was younger, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Clara, Elena, this is Special Agent James Morrison with the FBI, Martin said. He's with the White Collar Crime Division. Agent Morrison shook our hands, his grip firm and professional. Mrs. Whitmore, Ms. Martinez, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I understand this has been a difficult time. We settled in Clara's study, the door closed, curtains drawn. Agent Morrison pulled out a laptop and several folders. I'm going to be direct with you both, he said. Based on the documents Ms. Martinez photographed, we believe that Douglas Sterling and potentially others at Whitmore, Sterling, and associates have been engaged in systematic embezzlement of client funds for at least 5 years. We're talking about millions of dollars stolen from trust accounts, pension funds, and charitable foundations. Clara's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. The Ashford Foundation. We have accounts at that firm. Agent Morrison nodded grimly. Yes, ma'am. Your foundation has lost approximately $3 million over the past 4 years. The thefts were disguised as legitimate investment losses and administrative fees. That money was supposed to go to children's hospitals, education programs. Clara's voice trailed off. And it will again, Agent Morrison assured her. We're going to recover as much as we can and make sure the victims are made whole. But we need your help. Both of you. He turned to me. Ms. Martinez, the photographs you took are crucial evidence. But I need to ask, did anyone else know you were taking them? Could Richard or anyone else have known what you were doing? No, I said. Richard thought I was in the attic. I was alone in his study. The only people who knew were Clara and Martin. Good. That's very good. Agent Morrison pulled up something on his laptop. Now, about Senator Patricia Ashford. Her involvement is complicated. She's not directly part of the embezzlement scheme, but she has been accepting bribes from Sterling in exchange for political favors. Specifically, she's been blocking legislation that would have increased oversight of legal trust accounts. She's also used her influence to get certain cases dismissed and to have inconvenient investigations shut down. Clara closed her eyes. My aunt is corrupt. I'm afraid so. And that brings us to a problem. Agent Morrison leaned forward. We can't move against Sterling without moving against the senator. And if we move against the senator, we need to do it in a way that she can't use her political connections to bury the investigation. We need everything to be airtight, public, and impossible to ignore. What are you proposing? Martin asked. We want to set up a sting operation. We've been monitoring Sterling's communications. He's scheduled to meet with the senator in 3 days to discuss what he calls the Richards situation. He's worried that Richard's divorce will expose the firm's activities. We believe he's going to ask the senator to help him cover it up. You want to record that meeting, Clara said. Exactly. But more than that, we want them to incriminate themselves completely. Talk about specific crimes, specific bribes. We need them to hang themselves. Agent Morrison looked at Clara intently. And to do that, we need bait. We need them to think they're in danger. We need them to panic and show their hand. Clara straightened in her chair. You want to use me? I want you to schedule a meeting with your aunt. Tell her you're worried about the divorce, about what Richard might say to hurt the family reputation. Ask her advice about how to handle the firm. If Sterling thinks you're suspicious, thinks you might go digging, he'll reach out to the senator immediately. That meeting we need to record? You'll trigger it. You'll be putting Clara in danger, I said sharply. We'll have protection on her at all times, Agent Morrison assured me. The senator won't hurt her own niece. Not physically. She'll try to manipulate her, contain her, but Clara will be safe. Clara looked at me, then at Martin, then back at Agent Morrison. If I do this, I want 2 things. Name them. First, I want Elena protected. If anything happens to me, if this goes wrong, I want you to guarantee her safety. She has a daughter, a grandchild. They need to be safe too. Done, Agent Morrison said immediately. We'll put protective surveillance on Ms. Martinez and her family. Second, Clara continued, I want justice. Not just for me, not just for the foundation. For everyone they hurt. Every client they stole from, every person whose case got buried because Patricia made a phone call. I want them to face real consequences. Agent Morrison smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had finally cornered his prey. Mrs. Whitmore, nothing would make me happier. The next 3 days were surreal. Clara called her aunt, gave her performance perfectly. She was the worried niece, the fragile woman overwhelmed by her husband's betrayal, desperate for guidance. Patricia took the bait eagerly, suggesting they meet for lunch after she handled some urgent business with Richard's law firm. Meanwhile, I went about my normal routines, but nothing felt normal. There were FBI agents watching the house, though I couldn't see them. My daughter Maria called, confused about why 2 security consultants had shown up at her apartment to install a new alarm system. I told her it was a gift from Clara, which wasn't entirely a lie. Richard, predictably, was making noise. His lawyer was threatening to contest the restraining order, claiming Clara had manipulated a sick old woman, meaning me, which was both insulting and ridiculous since I was only 57. The newspapers had gotten wind of the divorce, and reporters were camping outside the estate gates. On the third day, Agent Morrison came by early in the morning. "It's happening," he said. "Sterling called the senator last night. They're meeting today at 2 o'clock at Sterling's private club. We have authorization to plant surveillance equipment. Clara, your meeting with Patricia is scheduled for 5. By then, we'll already have what we need." "Then why do I still need to meet with her?" Clara asked. "Because when she arrives, she'll be under arrest. We'll take her in the restaurant parking lot, in public, where she can't claim it's a political hit job. Her own niece will be there, visibly shocked. It removes any appearance of conspiracy." Clara nodded slowly. "You want me to be a witness to her arrest? And then you'll be safe. Once she's in custody, once the story breaks, there's no incentive for anyone to hurt you or Elena. It all becomes public record." That afternoon felt like the longest of my life. Clara and I sat in the living room, pretending to watch television, but really just watching the clock. At 3:30, Agent Morrison called. "We have it," he said, and I could hear the triumph in his voice. "Complete confessions. Sterling talked about the embezzlement, the bribes, everything. Patricia discussed specific cases she buried, specific amounts she was paid. It's over. We're moving now." Clara and I drove to the restaurant together. Agent Morrison had assigned 2 agents to accompany us, dressed as a couple on a date, sitting 3 tables away. Patricia was already there when we arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking immaculate in a designer suit, every inch the successful politician. "Clara, darling," she said, standing to embrace her niece. "You look tired. This whole business with Richard must be exhausting." "It has been difficult, Aunt Patricia," Clara said, and her voice was perfectly calibrated, not too strong, not too weak. "I'm so grateful you could meet with me." They sat down. Patricia ordered wine, made small talk about the weather and her latest committee assignment. She was smooth, practiced. I stood a respectful distance away, as I always did, the invisible help. Patricia glanced at me once, then dismissed me from her awareness entirely. Her mistake. "So," Patricia said, leaning in conspiratorially, "I spoke with Douglas Sterling this morning. He's very concerned about the situation with Richard. Some of Richard's files have gone missing, apparently. Files that could be embarrassing if they fell into the wrong hands." "Really?" Clara's voice was innocent. "What kind of files?" "Oh, just boring legal documents. Nothing that would interest you. But Douglas asked me to mention, very gently, you understand, that it would be better for everyone if this divorce could be handled quietly. Privately. Without a lot of discovery and depositions and such. He suggested a very generous settlement offer for you." "How generous?" Patricia named a figure. "It was substantial, but it was only a fraction of what Clara was actually entitled to. You could take that money, move on with your life, avoid years of ugly legal battles. Doesn't that sound preferable?" Clara took a sip of her water. "Aunt Patricia, are you asking me to accept less than I deserve so that Douglas Sterling doesn't get in trouble?" Patricia's smile tightened. "I'm asking you to think about the family reputation. The Ashford name. Your father built something important, Clara. Do we really want it dragged through the mud?" "My father built something honest," Clara said, and her voice was steel now. "He would be ashamed of what you've done. Patricia's face went cold. Excuse me? I know about the bribes, Patricia. I know about the cases you buried. I know everything. Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Other diners looked over. I don't know what nonsense Richard has filled your head with, but... She never finished the sentence. Agent Morrison appeared at the table, his badge held out. Behind him were two more agents. Senator Patricia Ashford, I'm Special Agent James Morrison with the FBI. You're under arrest for accepting bribes, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The restaurant went completely silent. Patricia's face cycled through shock, rage, and finally, calculation. She looked at Clara, understanding dawning. You set me up, she said quietly. Your own family. You stole from my foundation, Clara replied, her voice shaking but firm. You helped them steal from dozens of families. Children's hospitals, Patricia. You helped steal from sick children. Patricia looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time. The housekeeper, she said, and she actually laughed, a bitter sound. It was the housekeeper. Douglas was right. He said we should have been more careful about the staff. Agent Morrison was reading Patricia her rights. Other agents were leading her toward the door. The restaurant was chaos now, people on their phones, the manager trying to calm everyone down. Clara sat very still, tears running down her face. I moved to her side, put my hand on her shoulder. It's over, I said softly. Is it? She asked. My husband betrayed me. My aunt betrayed me. How many other people in my life were using me? Not everyone, I said firmly. Your children love you. Martin Rothschild has been faithful to you for decades. And I would walk through fire for you. Some people are worth trusting, Clara. Some people are real. She reached up and squeezed my hand. Thank you, Elena. For everything. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Richard was arrested and charged with fraud. Douglas Sterling was arrested the same day as Patricia. The news coverage was massive. Connecticut's political establishment was rocked. The law firm collapsed almost overnight. But from that chaos, something good emerged. Clara threw herself into rebuilding the Ashford Foundation, making it stronger, more transparent. She established new scholarships in my name, the Elena Martinez Education Fund, for the children of domestic workers. She testified before Congress about the need for better oversight of legal trust accounts. As for me, I did retire, but not entirely. I still come to the mansion 3 days a week, but now as Clara's personal assistant and friend, not her housekeeper. We hire a cleaning service for the actual housework. Clara insisted, and honestly, my back is grateful. My daughter Maria and her family moved into the guest house. Clara wanted them close, wanted to help raise my grandchildren. On Sundays, we all have dinner together in that grand dining room, Clara, her children when they visit, Maria, her husband, the grandkids, and me. We're loud and messy and nothing like the formal dinners I used to serve. It's perfect. Richard is serving 7 years in federal prison. Douglas Sterling got 15. Patricia Ashford lost her Senate seat and is serving 10 years. Her political career is destroyed, her legacy ruined. Sometimes I think about how it all happened because a housekeeper paid attention, because someone they considered invisible refused to stay silent. Last week, Clara and I were having coffee in the conservatory, watching the grandchildren play in the garden. Out of nowhere, she said, Elena, do you ever regret it? Speaking up? Everything that came after? I thought about it carefully. No, I said finally. For 20 years, I was silent when I should have spoken. I told myself I was being loyal, but really I was just afraid. Afraid of losing my job, afraid of disrupting things, afraid of not mattering. But that night when I saw those documents, I realized something. Silence isn't loyalty. Silence is just silence. And sometimes the most loyal thing you can do is tell the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Clara nodded, looking out at the garden. I spent 20 years pretending not to see what was right in front of me. We were both hiding, in our own ways. But we're not hiding anymore, I said. She smiled. No. No, we're not. One of my grandchildren, little Sophia, came running up to the window, pressing her face against the glass and making silly faces. We both laughed. This is what those men tried to take away, this joy, this family, this life. But they failed. They failed because they underestimated two women they considered powerless. Richard was wrong about me. I wasn't just a housekeeper. I was a witness. I was a protector. I was the person who remembered everything they tried to forget. And in the end, I was the person who brought their house of cards crashing down. Some people ask me if I miss the old days, the simplicity of just cleaning and cooking, of being invisible. The answer is no. I don't miss being a shadow. I spent 20 years watching other people live their lives. Now I'm finally living mine. Clara once asked me what I wanted my legacy to be. I told her I wanted people to remember that every person matters. Every person sees things, knows things, has value. The people you overlook, the ones you consider beneath you, we're watching. We're listening. And when you forget we exist, that's when we're most dangerous. Because shadows see everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, we step into the light. The sun was setting now, painting the conservatory in shades of gold and amber. Sophia was still at the window, now joined by her brother. Clara and I sat together, two women who had survived, who had fought back, who had won. To truth, Clara said, raising her coffee cup. To truth, I echoed, clinking my cup against hers. And in that moment, in that house that had held so many secrets, there was only light.